So picture this, right? The year is 2011, and you are in Austria, sitting in this stark, incredibly bureaucratic government office. You're not there because you committed a crime or, applying for some crazy high-level security clearance. You are there simply because you want a driver's license.
Just a standard piece of plastic.
Exactly. But the Austrian government has decided that before they can hand over that little piece of plastic, you have to undergo a rigorous, comprehensive psychological evaluation. Like, they need to prove you are sane enough to operate a motor vehicle.
Which, begs the question, what on earth did you do to trigger a state-mandated psychiatric intervention for a driver's license?
Right. And the symptom of the supposed madness, you submitted an ID photo wearing a plastic kitchen pasta strainer on your head.
A literal colander.
A colander. And you demanded that the government legally recognize it as your sacred religious headgear.
It's wild.
But the wildest part of this whole story isn't that this guy, he's an Austrian named Nico Alm, was forced to prove his sanity to the government over cookware. The wildest part is that he passed the evaluation, he fought the bureaucratic machine for 3 years, and he actually won.
He won! Yeah, it's really the ultimate collision of absurdist internet humor and the incredibly rigid machinery of state bureaucracy.
Oh, totally.
And when that collision happens, the results are far more profound than just a funny photo on a license. It literally forces the state to define the very nature of human belief.
Well, welcome to this deep dive. If you are joining us today, you are probably someone who loves unpacking how strange and surprising the world can be, and you like looking at those underlying systems that govern our lives.
Right.
Our mission for you today is to go through a massive stack of sources. We're talking legal documents, news archives, and some frankly bizarre holy texts to understand a phenomenon that started as an internet joke, but it somehow ended up testing the boundaries of constitutional law all around the globe.
Yeah, we are talking about the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster, or, as its followers call it, Pastafarianism.
Pastafarianism, I love it.
And, the imagery we are going to explore today is undeniably comedic.
Oh, absolutely.
We're going to be talking about pirates, beer volcanoes, microscopic marine life. But the underlying questions this movement raises are actually deeply serious.
Right, because it's not just a prank.
Exactly. We are looking at a movement that forces society to examine the philosophical burden of proof, the intricacies of the First Amendment, and how a government actually goes about defining the word religion without, violating its own democratic principles.
Yeah, I want to start by kind of stripping away all the global court cases and the massive internet following for a second, because before we can even look at what this religion is, we really have to look at the exact moment and the exact reason it was created.
The origin story.
The origin story. Because this wasn't just a random meme that got out of hand. It was a highly targeted, highly specific response to a massive cultural debate. It was a recipe for rebellion, if you will.
I see what you did there.
Thank you. So take us back to the catalyst. Where does this start?
Okay, so the setting is January 2005.
Okay.
The place is the state of Kansas in the United States. And to really understand the genesis of the Flying Spaghetti Monster, you have to understand the intense political and educational battle that was happening within the Kansas State Board of Education at that exact moment.
Oh, the evolution debate.
Exactly. The board was in the middle of this very public, very heated debate about science standards in public schools. Specifically, they were considering amending the state curriculum to permit the teaching of something called intelligent design as an alternative to the theory of evolution in high school biology classes.
Okay, let me make sure I'm wrapping my head around the precise argument of intelligent design as it existed back in 2005.
Go for it.
The core premise is that certain features of the universe and of living things are just so incredibly complex that they are best explained by an intelligent cause rather than an undirected natural process like natural selection. Is that the gist of it?
That is the core premise, yeah. But the crucial detail, and this is the detail that sparked this entire global movement, is how the proponents of intelligent design framed this intelligent cause to the government.
Right, because of the legal hurdles.
Exactly. In the U.S., the First Amendment mandates a strict separation of church and state, which means public schools absolutely cannot teach religious doctrine as science.
Right.
So, to bypass this constitutional hurdle, the intelligent design movement used intentionally ambiguous language. They didn't explicitly name the Christian God. They didn't name any specific deity from any specific world religion.
They just kept it vague.
Very vague. They simply argued, Look at the irreducible complexity of life. There must be some intelligent designer. They left the identity of that designer entirely blank. And they argued that this blank space made the concept a scientific hypothesis rather than a religious one.
So they were basically trying to find a legal loophole. They were saying, hey, we aren't teaching religion because we aren't telling the kids who the designer actually is.
That's the strategy.
And this is where our protagonist enters the story, right? Bobby Henderson.
Yes, Bobby Henderson.
At the time, he is a 24-year-old physics graduate from Oregon State University. He's just sitting at home observing this massive debate in Kansas. And he looks at this legal loophole, this whole idea that the designer is deliberately kept vague and unnamed, and he realizes something fundamental.
Which is?
If the intelligent designer can be absolutely anything, then it can be absolutely anything.
Exactly. Henderson sees the massive logical flaw in their strategy. By refusing to define the designer, they have inadvertently opened the door to literally any supernatural claim, no matter how ridiculous it is.
It's essentially like, I don't know, demanding a high school teach alchemy alongside chemistry, just because both involve mixing liquids in glass beakers.
Right, yeah.
You're using the superficial appearance of science to push something that fundamentally rejects the scientific method. So Henderson decides he is going to use this absurdity to highlight the loophole.
That is the exact mechanism of his satire. It's a classic philosophical maneuver, right?
Yeah.
It's known as reductio ad absurdum.
Reducing to the absurd.
Precisely. Reducing an argument to its most absurd extreme to prove just how flawed the foundational premise is. So in January 2005, Henderson sits down and writes a formal open letter to the Kansas State Board of Education.
And what does it say?
In this letter, he professes his deep, sincere belief that the universe was not created by the Christian God, nor by a generic, undefined designer, but by a supernatural entity that closely resembles a giant clump of spaghetti and meatballs.
Naturally.
He calls it the flying spaghetti monster.
And I love that the capitalization in the letter is brilliant. He treats flying spaghetti monster with the exact same reverence you would see in a traditional holy text.
Oh, he fully commits.
Yeah. And he doesn't just stop at a vague claim of creation. Because he is a physics graduate, he knows exactly how to attack the scientific processes that support evolution. He actually goes after radiocarbon dating.
Right, which is huge. I mean, radiocarbon dating is a method scientists use to determine the age of organic materials by measuring the decay of carbon-14 isotopes.
It's kind of the cornerstone of the timeline.
Exactly. It provides the timeline for evolutionary biology and the fossil record. And proponents of creationism frequently attack the validity of carbon dating.
But Henderson parodies this attack beautifully. He doesn't say carbon dating is flawed science. He argues in his letter that carbon dating is actually perfectly accurate, but the results are being manipulated in real time by his deity.
Right.
He writes that whenever a scientist performs carbon dating on a fossil, the flying spaghetti monster is physically there, invisible, changing the results with his noodly appendage.
His noodly appendage. It's iconic.
It's so good. But here is the real genius part of the letter. His actual demand to the school board. Because he doesn't write to them and say, don't teach intelligent design, keep religion out of schools.
Because that would just make him another standard voice in the debate.
Exactly. Instead, he says, I agree with you. We should teach multiple theories of creation. And if you are going to teach your undefined intelligent designer, you legally have to teach my belief too.
Yep.
He literally demands equal time in the public school science classroom. 1/3 of the time for intelligent design, 1/3 of the time for flying spaghetti monsterism, and 1/3 for logical conjecture based on overwhelming observable evidence.
And by demanding equal time, Henderson was forcing the school board into an impossible corner.
How so?
Well, if they acknowledge his letter, they have to either admit that all unprovable supernatural theories deserve time in a science classroom, which, would turn the curriculum into a chaotic joke, or they have to concede that the science classroom should rely solely on observable, testable science.
Which immediately disqualifies intelligent design.
Exactly. It's a trap.
And in the letter, he claims to be a concerned citizen representing more than 10 million others. Which, obviously, in January 2005 was a complete fabrication.
Yeah, he was just one guy in his house.
Just one guy. But it perfectly mimicked the language of political pressure groups. He lays out his philosophy very simply, stating that he doesn't have a problem with religion. What he has a problem with is religion posing as science.
Right.
And he adds this wonderful little kicker at the end. He says, if there's a God and he's intelligent, then I would guess he has a sense of humor.
Which is very telling.
So he seals up this letter, sends it off to the Kansas school board, and he waits.
And he receives absolutely no response.
Nothing at all.
Nothing. Crickets. Which honestly is entirely expected. The board members likely viewed it as crank mail and threw it out.
Fair enough.
But Henderson isn't deterred. In May 2005, having received no official reply, he decides to publish the open letter on his own personal website.
And we really have to remember the landscape of the internet in 2005 here.
Oh, it was a totally different world.
Right. This is pre-Twitter, pre-widespread algorithmic social media feeds. Virality happened organically on message boards and blogs.
And boy, did it go viral. It just exploded.
Did it?
Oh, yeah. The letter resonated deeply with a massive online demographic that was just incredibly frustrated with the political climate surrounding science education at the time. It became an instant sensation.
Wow.
Fans started building their own dedicated websites, generating fan art of the flying spaghetti monster, and spreading the word across major internet culture hubs, places like Boing Boing, Something Awful, and Fark.
The momentum must have been staggering. Within a few months, I mean, the mainstream media couldn't ignore it anymore. You had the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Chicago Sun-Times, all printing features on this bizarre internet phenomenon.
And Henderson himself was totally blindsided by the success. He noted that within a year of publishing the letter online, he received over 60,000 emails.
60,000.
Yeah. And the breakdown of those emails is fascinating. He estimated that about 95% of them were overwhelmingly supportive. You know, people thanking him for articulating their frustration in such a creative way.
But I'm guessing the other 5% weren't so friendly?
Not at all. The other 5% were people telling him he was going straight to hell. He received intense hate mail and actual death threats.
That threats over pasta.
Literally. And he would just calmly publish those threats on his website for everyone to read.
That's a power move. And what about the Kansas Board of Education itself? Like, once this became a global news story, did they ever respond?
They did, actually, and the reaction is incredibly revealing. Henderson eventually published the responses he managed to extract from the board.
Okay.
3 board members who had, importantly, opposed the curriculum amendments to include intelligent design. They responded positively. They understood the satire. They recognized it as a brilliant illustration of their own arguments.
What the others?
Well, a 4th board member responded with a very stern, very aggressive warning, stating simply, "It is a serious offense to mock God."
Wow. Which instantly draws the battle lines of this entire movement.
Yep.
Like, is it a harmless joke highlighting a legal loophole, or is it a malicious attack on the sacred? But here is the problem Henderson suddenly faced. He now had tens of millions of hits on his website. He had a massive global audience. But a single open letter is just a critique.
Right. It's just a starting point.
If you are going to claim that you are a legitimate religion demanding equal time and constitutional protections, a single joke isn't going to cut it. You need theology. You need a belief system. You need dogma.
Exactly. To sustain the momentum and the satirical weight of the argument, a fully fleshed out theology had to be constructed. But Henderson was faced with a paradox here.
Which is?
How do you build a religious dogma for a movement whose entire purpose is to mock rigid religious dogma?
That is tricky.
Right. His solution was to declare that the only dogma allowed in the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster is the rejection of dogma.
That's clever.
It is. However, he did propose a set of general tenets, and if you analyze these tenets, you see that they are meticulously crafted, point-by-point satires of the most common arguments used by proponents of creationism and biblical literalism.
Okay, let's unpack this theology, because it's wild. It starts, as all religions do, with a creation myth. According to the Pastafarian belief, the invisible, undetectable flying spaghetti monster created the universe. But the crucial detail, the theological twist here, is that he did it after drinking heavily.
Yes.
Now, why include that detail? Why make the creator intoxicated?
It is a direct, incredibly efficient satirical answer to one of the oldest dilemmas in theology, which is the problem of evil.
Okay, so the idea that if a creator is perfectly good and all-powerful, why is the world full of flaws, disease, and suffering?
Precisely. Theologians have spent millennia writing thousands of volumes attempting to reconcile a perfect creator with an imperfect world. The whole concept is known as theodicy.
Right.
Henderson bypasses all of that complex philosophy with a single immediate punchline. Why is the earth flawed? Because the creator was drunk when he made it.
That's hilarious.
It is. It's a humorous explanation that subtly highlights how traditional religions often tie themselves in massive philosophical knots trying to justify earthly imperfection.
And what about the overwhelming scientific evidence for evolution, like the fossil record, the geological strata, the carbon dating we talked about earlier?
Hmm.
If the flying spaghetti monster created the world recently, how do they explain dinosaur bones? Well, Pastafarians have an answer. They believe that all of that evolutionary evidence was intentionally fabricated and planted in the ground by the flying spaghetti monster himself
And why did he do that?
to test the faith of his followers.
Exactly. And this is an unfiltered parody of a very specific argument made by some young Earth creationists.
Really?
Oh, yeah. When faced with the fossil record, some fringe groups have literally argued that God placed dinosaur bones in the Earth specifically to test human faith, or conversely, that Satan placed them there to deceive humanity and lead them away from biblical literalism.
So Henderson just takes that argument and applies it to his spaghetti deity.
Right, revealing how circular and unfalsifiable that logic truly is.
It is the ultimate intellectual trump card. Any evidence you find that proves me wrong was actually planted there by my God to trick you. Therefore, your evidence actually proves my God exists.
You literally cannot argue against it.
You can't. Which brings us to their conception of the afterlife. I want you to think about the traditional concept of heaven and hell that, you might have grown up with or seen in popular culture.
Okay.
Heaven is usually depicted as a place of eternal, serene paradise. Hell is a place of unspeakable, eternal agony and fire. It is a stark, terrifying binary.
Very stark.
Well, Henderson decides to lampoon this reward and punishment paradigm. The Pastafarian heaven features two main attractions: a giant beer volcano and a stripper factory.
A stripper factory.
Though, as the religion evolved, different factions have described it as a prostitute factory or, for the more family-friendly crowds, a paint stripper factory.
Paint stripper, right.
But the description of hell is where the real genius lies.
Oh, for sure. In Pastafarian theology, hell is exactly the same as heaven. It also features a beer volcano and a stripper factory.
So what's the punishment?
The only difference is that in hell, the beer is stale and the strippers have sexually transmitted diseases.
Is delightfully absurd. I mean, almost middle school in its humor.
It is.
But think about what it's actually doing. By making hell just mildly, annoyingly inconvenient rather than a realm of eternal torture, it subtly mocks the extreme, disproportionate nature of eternal damnation found in traditional doctrines.
It takes the teeth right out of the threat.
Exactly. But of all the tenets Henderson laid out, the one that gained the most cultural traction, the one that really took on a life of its own, involves pirates.
Ah, yes. The reverence for pirates is a foundational pillar of Pastafarianism. According to their beliefs, pirates are not criminals. They are actually absolute divine beings and were the original authentic Pastafarians.
And if you were sitting there thinking, wait, weren't pirates violent thieves who robbed ships and murdered people? Pastafarians will calmly explain to you that your view of history has been completely corrupted.
Corrupted by who?
They claim that the negative image of pirates is entirely based on misinformation spread by Christian theologians in the Middle Ages.
Of course.
According to Pastafarian doctrine, the original pirates were actually peace-loving explorers. They were spreaders of goodwill who sailed the seas distributing candy to small children.
Candy.
Candy. The modern image of the pirate as a cutthroat is just a centuries-old smear campaign.
Oh.
And all those mysterious disappearances of ships and planes in the Bermuda Triangle,
Let me guess.
those are entirely caused by the ghosts of these divine pirates.
It's so good, but the pirate mythology is funny, sure. The amazing thing is that Henderson used it to execute a masterclass in statistical pedagogy.
Oh, the graph.
The graph. He used the concept of pirates to teach one of the most fundamental lessons in data literacy. Correlation does not imply causation.
This is, without a doubt, my absolute favorite part of the original open letter.
It's brilliant. So in the letter, Henderson addresses the argument often made by some religious fundamentalists that natural disasters or societal decay are caused by a lack of respect or worship toward their specific deity.
Right, you know the argument. Like hurricanes are happening because society has turned away from traditional values.
Exactly. So Henderson decides to combat this logic using quote-unquote data. He presents the argument that global warming, earthquakes, hurricanes, and other natural disasters are actually a direct effect of the shrinking number of pirates in the world since the 1800s.
And to prove this, He includes a graph.
Yes.
Let's visualize this graph for a second because it is a masterpiece of intentional deception.
Please do.
On the vertical axis, the y-axis, you have the global average temperature. It is steadily going up. On the horizontal axis, the x-axis, you have the approximate number of pirates in the world. It is steadily going down.
Okay.
When you look at the line on the graph, it shows a perfect, smooth, inverse correlation. As the number of pirates decreases over the centuries, the global temperature increases perfectly in tandem.
Sounds convincing.
It does. But if you look closely at the numbers on the bottom axis, the number of pirates,
Yeah.
they make absolutely no mathematical sense. They are completely disordered to force the line to look smooth.
Like how?
The axis starts at 35,000, then it goes up to 45,000, then drops to 20,000, 15,000, 5,400, and finally 17.
17.
It is intentionally terrible math, but visually, it creates a compelling narrative. He is telling the school board, look, I have empirical data showing that our lack of pirates is causing global warming. My data is just as valid and structurally identical to your claim that a lack of prayer causes hurricanes. Two trends moving in the same direction does not mean one causes the other.
He exposes the third variable problem beautifully, and the best part is he refused to let the pirate joke die.
He kept it going.
Oh, yeah. Fast forward to 2008, there was a massive surge in real-world pirate activity in the Gulf of Aden, right off the coast of Somalia. It was huge international news.
I remember that.
Henderson immediately posts an update on his website, using this real-world crisis as additional proof of his theory. He points out that Somalia currently has the highest number of pirates in the world. And what else does Somalia have?
Oh, no.
The lowest carbon emissions of any country. Checkmate, global warming. The pirates are saving the climate.
It's brilliant.
It really is. To this day, science and statistics teachers around the world pull up the flying spaghetti monster pirate graph to visually explain confounding variables and logical fallacies to their students.
I love that. So you have a creation myth, an afterlife, and divine beings. But a religion also needs a calendar. It needs rhythm, right?
Definitely.
For Pastafarians, every single Friday is a holy day. When they finish their prayers, they don't say amen. They say ramen, R-A-M-E-N, which is obviously a nod to the Japanese noodle and also a reference to the noodly appendages of their deity.
Naturally.
They celebrate Passover, which simply requires consuming massive amounts of pasta. They observe Ramadan, a period where adherents are encouraged to only eat cheap ramen noodles, often reflecting on their days as struggling college students.
A very relatable holiday.
Very.
Yeah.
And naturally, they observe September 19th International Talk, like a pirate day, as a solemn religious holiday.
They also have a very broadly defined celebration that is simply called holiday.
Just holiday.
Holiday. It occurs roughly around the late December window, overlapping with Christmas, Hanukkah, and Kwanzaa. Because Pastafarians reject formal dogma, there are no specific requirements for how you are supposed to celebrate holiday. You just celebrate it however you please.
And this vaguely defined holiday becomes an incredible weapon in the American culture wars.
Oh, it really does.
Think about the intense annual debates about the war on Christmas. You know, the arguments over whether retail stores should say Merry Christmas or Happy Holidays.
Right. It's a huge talking point every year.
Pastafarians look at this debate and decide to interpret the increasing mainstream use of the phrase Happy Holidays as direct societal support for Pastafarianism.
They co-opted it.
They totally did. When George W. Bush's White House sent out official Christmas cards in 2005 that wished people a happy holiday season, Henderson actually wrote the president a formal thank you note for his support of the Pastafarian faith.
No way.
He did. He even included a little Pastafarian car emblem for the presidential limousine. You know those classic Christian fish symbols people put on the back of their cars?
The ichthies.
Right.
Yeah.
He said the Pastafarian version, it's the fish outline, but with googly eyes and little noodly appendages. He also publicly thanked massive corporations like Walmart for officially endorsing Pastafarianism by using the phrase Happy Holidays in their advertising.
It is just a relentless mirroring of how traditional religions operate and demand space in the public sphere.
Exactly.
But having a viral internet joke, some clever holidays, and a funny graph isn't enough to secure actual First Amendment protections. To legally corner the government, Henderson realized he had to play their exact game. And what is the one thing every legally protected religion on earth have?
An ancient codified text, scripture.
Exactly. And the publishing world saw the massive cultural footprint of this movement very early on. In December 2005, just months after the original letter went viral, Bobby Henderson received a reported $80,000 advance from Villard, which is an imprint of Random House, to write a foundational text.
$80,000. And I just love that when the press asked Henderson what he was going to do with an $80,000 advance, he claimed he was going to use the proceeds to build a literal pirate ship,
Oh, of course.
so he could physically sail around the world and spread the Pastafarian word.
Did he ever build it?
Sadly, no. But the book drops in March 2006. It's titled The Gospel of the Flying Spaghetti Monster. It essentially elaborates on all the beliefs established in that first open letter, uses heavy satire to point out perceived flaws in evolutionary biology, and details the Pastafarian lifestyle.
And crucially, it parodies the aggressive evangelism of other faiths.
Right.
The gospel literally urges readers to try out Pastafarianism for 30 days. It offers a kind of spiritual money-back guarantee. The text actually says, if you don't like us, your old religion will most likely take you back.
That is so cheeky. It sold over 100,000 copies and was actually nominated for a Quill Award in humor.
Wow.
But it wasn't the only text. Because this was a religion born on the early internet, it had an inherently open-source collaborative ethos.
It belonged to the community.
Exactly. So in September 2005, a member of the official Pastafarian forums, who went by the name Solipsy, started a massive crowdsourcing project. They wanted to collect texts, parables, and rules from fellow Pastafarians all over the world to compile a book analogous to the Bible.
This project became known as the Loose Canon, the holy book of the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster. It was a massive undertaking that took 5 years to complete, finally becoming available for public download in 2010.
The writing in the Loose Canon is a brilliant stylistic parody. The authors perfectly capture the cadence, the archaic grammar, and the jealous authority of Old Testament scripture, while constantly undercutting it with modern jokes.
Do you have an example?
Oh, I have a great one. For example, in the Book of Suggestions, chapter 1, verse 1, it reads, I am the flying spaghetti monster. Thou shalt have no other monsters before me. Afterwards is okay, just use protection. The only monster who deserves capitalization is me. Other monsters are false monsters, undeserving of capitalization.
See, it mocks the petty jealousies often attributed to divine beings in ancient texts, reducing the concept of divine wrath to an argument about grammar and safe sex.
There are also incredible parodies of famous biblical stories. There is a passage about the great pirate Solomon.
Oh, like King Solomon.
Right, which parodies the famous story of King Solomon threatening to cut a baby in half to resolve a dispute between two women.
Okay, so what does Pirate Solomon do?
Well, in the Pastafarian version, Pirate Solomon is dealing with a slacker who hasn't done his fair share of the work. The text says, since you have done a half-assed job, you will receive half an ass. The great pirate Solomon grabbed his ceremonial scimitar and struck his remaining donkey, cleaving it in two.
Wow.
That's from the Book of Slackers, chapter 1, verses 51 through 52.
The Book of Slackers. That's incredible. But the evolution of Pastafarian scripture didn't stop there. And this is where the sociological analysis of the movement becomes incredibly complex.
How so?
Well, in 2018, a new text was published, the New Testament of the Flying Spaghetti Monster, Dinner 2.0. And in this text, we see a subtle but profound shift in the tone and purpose of the satire.
Yes. This is where the movement starts to bend my mind a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Dinner 2.0 includes a section called the It's Better If You Do's and the It's Better If You Don'ts. This is clearly their version of the 10 Commandments.
Right.
But I want you to listen to what these commandments actually say. The do's include things like, it's better if you find a thing you are good at. It's better if you live in harmony with the world. It's better if you make art. It's better if you work together.
And the don'ts are equally grounded in secular humanism, right? Like, it's better if you don't put people in cages. It's better if you don't work too much. It's better if you don't value possessions. It's better if you don't hurt others. It's better if you don't censor things.
Okay, wait, I have to push back here.
Right.
Or rather, I have a massive question about what this means.
Shoot.
If a group of people creates a moral framework, rules like don't put people in cages, make art, live in harmony with the world, even if that framework is originally wrapped up in a joke about a divine carbohydrate,
Right.
does the text stop being a parody? If people actually use these rules as a functional ethical guide for their lives, hasn't it just become a real religion? Like, those are objectively good rules to live by.
You have just hit on the exact pivot point where sociologists start to heavily debate Pastafarianism.
Okay.
What began in 2005 as a purely negative project, meaning a project designed solely to critique and tear down the arguments of intelligent design, slowly started to build a positive community framework.
It evolved.
It did. By offering actual functional humanist principles masked as pasta-themed commandments, the text provides a genuine ethical foundation for its adherents.
So it stops being just a joke to some people.
It blurs the line between a spoof and a sincere philosophical life stance. If a community gathers, shares meals, supports each other, and lives by a shared ethical code, well, the sociological definition of a religion starts to look very similar to what the Pastafarians are doing, regardless of whether they actually believe a literal monster lives in the sky.
That is fascinating. And armed with these texts, these ethical codes, and a massive, highly engaged internet following, mostly centered around college campuses at first, Pastafarianism moved out of the internet forums.
Yeah.
It stepped into the real world of cultural activism.
It did. The flying spaghetti monster essentially became the teapot in the room.
The teapot in the room. I love that. The teapot reference is essential to understanding the academic respect this movement garnered, isn't it?
Absolutely. The flying spaghetti monster is widely acknowledged by philosophers and scientists as the perfect modern incarnation of Russell's teapot.
Explain Russell's teapot for us. What is the actual philosophy there?
Bertrand Russell was a highly influential British philosopher. In 1952, he proposed an analogy to illustrate the concept of the philosophic burden of proof.
Okay.
He argued, imagine I claim that there is a tiny, ordinary china teapot revolving in an elliptical orbit around the sun, somewhere between Earth and Mars. I tell you that this teapot is too small to be seen by our most powerful telescopes.
So it's undetectable.
Undetectable. Because my claim cannot be definitively disproved. I mean, you cannot physically search every single inch of the solar system to prove the teapot isn't there. Does that mean it is reasonable for me to demand that society accept my teapot theory as truth?
Let me try an analogy here to see if I have the mechanics right.
Go for it.
So Russell's teapot is essentially like me pointing at a locked, impenetrable safe and telling you there's a live, breathing fire dragon inside.
Okay.
You lean in and say, I don't hear anything breathing. They say the dragon is sleeping. You touch the metal and say it's not hot. I say it's a cold-blooded dragon.
Right, you have an excuse for everything.
Exactly. I keep moving the goalposts so you can never technically prove me wrong. And because you can't prove the dragon isn't in there, I demand that you treat my dragon theory as an established scientific fact.
That is a perfect analogy. Russell's point was that the burden of proof lies upon the person making the unfalsifiable claim, not on the skeptics to disprove it. You cannot just yell, prove I'm wrong, and treat that as evidence.
That makes total sense.
And the flying spaghetti monster is the 21st century internet-era equivalent of Russell's teapot. Richard Dawkins, the famous evolutionary biologist, explicitly used the FSM to explain this concept in his books.
Oh. Dawkins weighed in.
Yes, he noted that the onus is entirely on the person claiming that God or the flying spaghetti monster or fairies exist. It is not up to the rest of the world to disprove their existence.
So the FSM highlights the arbitrariness of holding any one specific view of supernatural creation without evidence, because mathematically any unproven view is just as plausible as a monster made of spaghetti.
Exactly. And the broader internet culture embraced this epistemological warfare gleefully.
Oh, totally. Boing Boing, the incredibly popular internet culture website, famously offered a $250,000 prize, which they later raised to a staggering $1 million payable to any individual who could produce empirical evidence proving that Jesus is not the son of the flying spaghetti monster.
Which, again, was a highly targeted parody.
Right.
They modeled this $1 million challenge after Kent Hovind, a prominent young Earth creationist. Hovind had offered his own large cash prize to anyone who could prove evolution was true to his specific, constantly moving standards.
So Boing just flipped the script.
Yeah, demanding proof of a negative to show how absurd Hovind's challenge was.
But Pastafarians didn't just stay in the realm of philosophical thought experiments and internet bounties. They got involved in local grassroots politics.
They did.
In December 2007, the school board in Polk County, Florida, was having a debate that looked exactly like the one in Kansas 2 years prior. 5 of the 7 board members publicly declared a personal belief in intelligent design, and there was a massive push to adopt new science standards that would challenge the teaching of evolution.
And the local Pastafarian community mobilized instantly.
They did. They flooded the school board members with emails, passionately demanding equal instruction time for the flying spaghetti monster.
And how did the board take that?
The board members were furious. One member, Margaret Lofton, who fiercely supported intelligent design, publicly dismissed the emails as ridiculous and insulting. She went to the press and said, "They've made us the laughingstock of the world." She absolutely refused to engage with them.
She felt mocked.
Highly mocked.
Yeah.
But you know what? As the controversy blew up and the absurdity of the situation made national news, the local scientific community was able to rally. The vice president of the local University of South Florida campus publicly stated that intelligent design is not science, not even pseudoscience.
Yeah. So the spotlight helped.
Yes. Ultimately, the intelligent design standards were not adopted in Polk County. The absurdity worked. It derailed the legislation.
This is what cultural scholars refer to as the epistemological humility of Pastafarianism. It functions as a highly effective tool of carnivalesque subversion.
Carnivalesque subversion. I like that term.
Right. Think about how defensive people get when their specific, deeply held religious beliefs are directly attacked. Conversations shut down immediately.
People build walls.
Exactly. But by dressing up in pirate gear and demanding equal time for pasta, Pastafarians safely allow people to critique deeply entrenched religious and political power structures without directly attacking a specific traditional deity.
The humor creates a shield.
Yes, the humor creates a shield, but the activism underneath the joke is highly effective.
And their real-world impact expanded in ways that directly challenge that it's just a joke label. Have you heard of Kiva?
The microfinancing site?
Yeah. It's a massive nonprofit microfinancing site where people pool their money to give small loans to entrepreneurs in developing nations. On Kiva, users can form teams to track their charitable giving, and these teams are often based on religious congregations.
Let me guess, there's a Pastafarian team.
Oh, there is. The Flying Spaghetti Monster group on Kiva made it their ongoing unified mission to top all other religious congregations in the sheer number of loans issued.
That's amazing.
Their motto on the site is, "Thou shalt share that none may seek without funding," which is a very clever pun on a line from their loose cannon. And their success has been staggering. As of late 2018, the Pastafarian team reported having funded over $4 million in microloans.
$4 million. That's real money, changing real lives, issued in the name of a parody religion.
It really forces you to ask, if the charity is real, does it matter if the deity is fake?
That is a phenomenal question.
And their cultural footprint is everywhere. There's a literal deep-sea creature named after it. Bathyphysa coniferea, a type of siphonophore, which is a bizarre, stringy, floating marine organism, is officially nicknamed the Flying Spaghetti Monster by marine biologists.
Because it looks just like it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the FSM made a guest appearance as a character in a Season 6 episode of Futurama called A Clockwork Origin. There is a children's Bible of the FSM published and sold in Germany.
Wow.
And perhaps most surprisingly, the United States Army has officially produced identification tags, dog tags, for soldiers that list atheist FSM as their designated belief system preference.
Which brings us to the critical threshold of this entire movement.
How so?
Well, it is one thing to have a massive cultural footprint. It is one thing to raise money on Kiva or to be referenced in sci-fi cartoons. But sociologically and legally speaking, the ultimate test of any religion is how the apparatus of the state interacts with it.
Right.
How does a government, bound by a constitution, deal with Pastafarianism?
Right. It's time for the Colander Crusades.
The Colander Crusades.
Because Pastafarians realize something profound. If they truly believe their core tenet, that their religion was structurally and legally just as legitimate as any other, then they should be entitled to the exact same religious exemptions and accommodations that the government provides to major world religions.
That makes logical sense.
And they decided to test this theory in the most mundane, bureaucratic setting possible. The Department of Motor Vehicles.
Why the DMV?
Because driver's license photos are one of the most common intersections of state religious exemption and ordinary citizens.
Ah, right. Most jurisdictions globally have strict rules requiring you to take off hats, caps, or head coverings for your official ID photo.
Yep.
The exception to this rule is if you wear that head covering daily for sincere religious reasons, such as a Muslim hijab, a Jewish kippah, or a Sikh turban.
So Pastafarians argue that their sincere, deeply held religious headgear is the traditional kitchen pasta strainer or colander.
Which brings us back to our friend in Austria, Nico Alm, the pioneer.
The guy from the beginning.
Yes. In 2008, Alm read about the Austrian regulations regarding religious headgear exemptions. He decided to apply for his driver's license wearing a plastic pasta strainer on his head.
And as we discussed, the Austrian authorities did not view this as a harmless prank. It triggered a 3-year legal and bureaucratic fight. The authorities mandated that Alm undergo an extensive medical and psychological examination to certify that he was mentally fit to drive a car.
The state's logic was essentially, anyone who demands to wear a kitchen utensil on their head for an official government document must be psychologically unstable.
But wait, from the state's perspective, isn't this incredibly dangerous ground? I mean, I understand the absurdity of the colander, but if the government starts handing out psych evils to anyone whose religious practices seem weird to the mainstream, aren't they just pathologizing minority religions?
That is exactly the danger, and that is exactly the point Alm was making. Who decides what is crazy and what is sacred? Alm passed the psychological evaluation. He was perfectly sane. He was just making a constitutional point. And in July 2011, he finally won the right and received his official Austrian driver's license featuring a photo of him wearing the colander.
That is a legendary victory.
Now, to save face, the Austrian authorities later tried to walk it back. They released statements claiming the colander wasn't technically recognized as religious headgear per se, but rather that his face was fully visible under the strainer, so it didn't violate the technical rules of the photo.
Oh, whatever, they capitulated.
They totally did. The precedent was set, the floodgates open.
Alm's victory sparked a global wave of Pastafarians attempting the exact same feat. And the results have been wildly, chaotically inconsistent, which in itself highlights the arbitrary nature of state-recognized religion.
Definitely.
Let's look at the Netherlands. A man named Dirk Jan Dijkstra applied for a Dutch passport wearing a colander. The local municipality flat out rejected it.
So what did he do?
So Dijkstra thinks, you want to play the bureaucracy game, I'll get you the paperwork. He actually goes to the Dutch Chamber of Commerce and officially, legally, registers the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster as a recognized church association.
Well, the municipality still said no.
Right.
This triggered a massive legal battle that escalated through the Dutch legal system. Another law student, Mieke de Wilde, took her specific colander case all the way to the Council of State, the highest general administrative court in the Netherlands, in 2018.
And did she win?
The Dutch courts ultimately ruled against the Pastafarians, but their reasoning is fascinating. The court ruled that while Pastafarianism qualifies as a life stance, it does not meet the strict legal criteria of a religion under European human rights frameworks.
A life stance. That's an interesting distinction.
It is. Furthermore, the court made a specific theological argument. They argued that even if it were a religion, there is no actual duty or mandate written in Pastafarian text that strictly requires followers to wear a colander at all times. Therefore, the specific religious exemption for headgear didn't apply to them.
Wow. So the secular court essentially acted as theologians, reading the Pastafarian texts to determine if the colander was canonically mandated.
Exactly. They were interpreting scripture.
And meanwhile, over in the United States, it is a complete patchwork of absolute chaos depending on which state DMV you happen to walk into.
Tell me about it.
You have Lindsay Miller in Massachusetts. She won the right to wear her colander in 2015 after getting official legal representation from the American Humanist Association's Legal Center.
Okay, that's one win.
You have Asia Carrera, a former adult film star, who successfully got her colander photo in Utah in 2014. Sean Corbett fought for 2 years across multiple DMV locations in Arizona before finally getting his colander license in 2017.
So some states are allowing it.
Yes, and a man in Wisconsin won his case after his lawyers successfully argued that the First Amendment explicitly dictates the government cannot be in the business of deciding what qualifies as a real religion.
That's a very strong constitutional argument. But on the flip side, you have states flat out rejecting it, and their justifications are legally terrifying.
Really? Like what?
A Pastafarian in New Jersey was denied because the DMV explicitly stated that a pasta strainer was not on a list of approved religious headwear.
Wait. The state of New Jersey has a pre-approved list of recognized religions.
That is the implication. And it is deeply, profoundly dicey from a constitutional perspective.
I would think so.
The moment a government creates an approved list of religions, they have violated the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment, which prohibits the government from establishing or favoring specific religions.
That is wild.
In Illinois, a student named Rachel Hoover initially got her colander photo approved, but then the Illinois Secretary of State's office caught wind of it. They literally overturned the decision and canceled her license after the fact.
Canceled it.
Their official statement was that the photo was incorrect and that Pastafarianism is a mockery of religion rather than a practice itself.
Ohio rejected a man by claiming their policy only allows religious headgear if you wear it in public in your daily life, which presumably the DMV clerk assumed he didn't do with his kitchen strainer.
It's just incredible to watch the state panic over this, but Australia might have the most dramatic disparity of all.
Oh.
Yeah, in New South Wales and Victoria, the government seemingly didn't care. They issued provisional driver's licenses to people wearing colanders without much fuss.
So pretty chill.
But in South Australia, a resident named Guy Ablon tried to get his firearms license with a colander photo. The authorities didn't just reject the photo, they went scorched earth.
What did they do?
They seized his legally obtained guns. They heavily interrogated him about his religious beliefs. And, mirroring the Austrian case, they forced him to undergo a psychiatric evaluation before they would even consider returning his weapons.
All of this over a pasta strainer.
It perfectly illustrates the central tension of religious freedom. When an individual claims a sincere belief, the state struggles immensely to objectively measure the sincerity of that belief without overstepping its bounds.
Right, because how does a DMV clerk look into someone's soul and decide if their faith is real or a joke?
We can't.
They literally can't. And Pastafarians didn't stop at driver's licenses. They pushed into other massive areas of state-sanctioned religious privilege, specifically marriage and free speech in public spaces.
The marriage question is fascinating. New Zealand was actually incredibly progressive on this front.
Really?
Yeah, the New Zealand government officially authorized Pastafarian representatives as legal marriage celebrants. They stated that the movement met the criteria for organizations promoting philosophical or humanitarian convictions.
So they actually got to officiate weddings.
The first legally recognized state-sanctioned Pastafarian wedding took place in New Zealand in April 2016.
In the United States, however, the marriage question took a much more litigious route.
Oh, of course.
In Minnesota, a secular group called Atheists for Human Rights sued Washington County. The county had strict rules dictating who was allowed to officiate weddings, generally limiting it to recognized religious clergy or judges.
Okay, standard procedure.
The atheists pointed out a massive loophole. They showed the court that anyone, anywhere, could go to the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster website, pay $20, and get an instant digital ordination mill certificate.
Ah.
And under the county's own rules, the state legally had to recognize that $20 novelty certificate as valid religious credentials to marry people.
Their argument was a legal checkmate.
It really was.
They were basically saying, if the state is forced by law to accept a $20 internet FSM certificate from a parody website, then the state's requirement for religious credentials is legally meaningless. It's a sham that discriminates against sincere, secular humanist celebrants who refuse to buy a fake certificate.
And Washington County knew they were caught in a legal trap. A few days before the federal court hearing was supposed to take place, the county just changed its policy.
We back down.
They authorized the secular celebrant to officiate weddings, specifically to render the lawsuit moot, so a federal judge wouldn't have to formally rule on the absurdity of their religious requirements. It is brilliant legal warfare by the atheists.
We also see this warfare happening in public square displays.
Oh, the statues.
In 2008, a group of Pastafarians in Crossville, Tennessee, requested permission to put up a flying spaghetti monster statue in the designated free speech zone on the county courthouse lawn, right alongside traditional religious statues that were already there.
And because of the First Amendment, they were permitted. The display went up. It caused a massive national controversy. It got covered by Rolling Stone magazine. People were outraged.
And eventually, the county government utilized the ultimate, if I can't have it, no one can maneuver.
What did they do?
They just removed all long-term statues from the premises, including the traditional ones, rather than be forced to host the flying spaghetti monster.
Wow, they literally nuked the site.
We saw a similar battle over public signage in Germany, too. The Church of the FSM requested official city signage in the town of Templin.
Like the church signs on the side of the road?
Exactly. You know those signs as you enter a town, the ones that say Catholic Mass at 9 a.m., Protestant service at 11 a.m.? The Pastafarians demanded a sign announcing their weekly Friday noodle mess, their pasta mass, at 10 a.m.
Which sparked a multi-year legal battle.
It went through the regional courts all the way to the European Court of Human Rights. Ultimately, the courts debated the nature of their organization, but in 2021, the Templin City Council just voted to permanently authorize the signs themselves to end the headache.
So I want to pause here and ask you, the listener, to think about what this all means for the concept of government-recognized religion.
It's a heavy question.
If the state gets to decide that your pasta strainer is just satire and therefore legally invalid, but someone else's traditional headgear is sacred and protected, hasn't the government just established a state-approved list of real religions?
Right.
Doesn't that violate the very core of religious freedom? If the state determines what is sacred, is it truly free?
That is the exact question this movement forces society to confront. As Pastafarianism gained ground legally and culturally, the critical reception and the pushback from the establishment revealed exactly where the battle lines of modern theology and constitutional law are drawn.
Unsurprisingly, the scientific community loved the movement. Justin Pope, writing for the Associated Press, called it a clever and effective argument. He noted that the only reasonable solution to the equal time debate in schools is to just keep the science classroom focused entirely on the best available observable science.
Simon Singh, writing for the Daily Telegraph, called Henderson's original letter a masterstroke defending rationality.
But the proponents of intelligent design, the original targets of the satire, obviously pushed back hard.
Yeah, they weren't happy. Conservative columnist Jeff Jacoby wrote a piece in the Boston Globe arguing that intelligent design is legitimate science, and that it isn't primitivism or Bible-thumping or flying spaghetti.
Though, for context, it must be noted that the United States National Academy of Sciences has definitively, officially, rejected the characterization of intelligent design as science.
But the most fascinating pushback came from Peter Gollings, writing for Answers in Genesis, a prominent young Earth creationist ministry.
Oh, what did he say?
He actually pointed out an incredible irony in the Pastafarian strategy. He said that by mocking the intelligent design movement for not identifying a specific deity, by exploiting the loophole that left the door open for a spaghetti monster, the Pastafarians are actually acknowledging that intelligent design hasn't affiliated with a particular religion.
Wait, what?
Yeah. He claimed the satire only works because intelligent design isn't inherently religious on paper, which is the exact opposite of what the critics were trying to prove.
It is a rhetorical labyrinth. He's using their own parody to validate his legal defense.
It's quite the spin. But the most definitive and perhaps most legally perilous pushback came from the American judicial system itself, specifically a federal court in the state of Nebraska.
Right. This is where the hammer comes down. This was a major ruling under a specific piece of legislation called the Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act, or RLUIPA.
RLUIPA, yeah.
Without getting too bogged down in legal jargon, what did the Nebraska federal court actually decide about the flying spaghetti monster?
Well, the case involved an inmate who was demanding Pastafarian religious accommodations in prison.
Okay.
The federal court ruled unequivocally against him. The judge stated that the flying spaghetti monster is a satirical parody religion, not an actual religion, and therefore Pastafarians are not entitled to religious accommodations under RLUIPA or the First Amendment.
Oh, they just shut it down.
The ruling was blunt. It stated, "This is not a question of theology. The FSM gospel is plainly a work of satire, meant to entertain while making a pointed political statement. To read it as religious doctrine would be little different from grounding a religious exercise on any other work of fiction."
Okay, let's unpack this carefully.
Yeah.
As someone who loves language, that word fiction jumps out at me like a flashing red light.
Fairly so.
I want to be very clear here, and I want to impartially remind you, the listener, that we are not taking a stance on the validity of any traditional religion. We are purely looking at the legal mechanics at play.
Absolutely.
But if a federal court explicitly denies a religion's legal status by declaring its foundational text to be a work of fiction meant to make a political statement,
Yeah.
aren't they wading into incredibly dangerous constitutional waters?
Absolutely. The paradox here is profound, and legal scholars have pointed it out repeatedly.
Because they're basically acting as literary critics for holy texts now.
By legally ruling that the Gospel of the Flying Spaghetti Monster is fiction, the court is implicitly assigning itself the authority to determine what makes traditional scriptures not fiction in the eyes of the law.
Yes, if they can declare one text a fictional story, they have given themselves the power to judge all holy texts.
Precisely. How does a secular court objectively, legally define the line between a sincere belief in a resurrected Savior or a prophet receiving dictation from an angel versus a sincere belief in a creator made of pasta?
They can't.
From a strict evidentiary standpoint, none of those claims can be scientifically proven in a court of law. The courts are essentially forced to rely on historical tradition, cultural consensus, and the sheer number of adherents to define what is real religion.
So Pastafarianism exposes the uncomfortable reality that the legal definition of religion is often based purely on how long the belief has been around and how many people take it seriously, rather than any objective, measurable standard of the belief's factual reality.
It is the ultimate stress test for the First Amendment. It forces the legal system to articulate the boundaries of faith, and it turns out those boundaries are incredibly blurry and somewhat arbitrary.
Let's recap the incredible journey we've unpacked today. What started in January 2005 as a witty, satirical letter to the Kansas State Board of Education from a 24-year-old physics grad turned into a genuine global phenomenon.
It really did.
The Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster generated its own crowdsourced scriptures. It created a calendar of holidays. It inspired massive charitable drives, raising millions of dollars in real-world microloans on Kiva.
And it sparked complex, highly consequential legal battles spanning from Austrian psychological evaluations to Australian gun confiscations to federal courtrooms in Nebraska trying to define the word fiction.
It is a testament to the power of the internet to organize human action, and a masterclass in the subversive power of parody.
But I think the most important thing we can take away from this is a lingering philosophical dilemma. I want the listener to really ponder this. If a parody religion provides its followers with a genuine sense of community, a set of shared moral values like, it's better if you don't put people in cages, and mobilizes real-world charitable action that actually helps people, at what point does the satire end? Can a joke, if practiced devoutly enough and lived out ethically, reverse engineer itself into a true religion?
If it looks like a religion, acts like a religion, and does the positive social work of a religion, maybe the original satirical intent of the author just doesn't matter anymore.
Exactly.
It really brings us back to the core of what we consider sacred. We usually expect the blueprint for religion to be an ancient scroll discovered in a desert cave, treated with absolute unsmiling reverence.
But maybe, in the modern world, a blueprint drawn on a digital napkin in 2005
A blueprint featuring a heavily intoxicated monster made of spaghetti
is exactly the kind of stress test our legal and cultural systems needed to figure out what we actually mean when we talk about belief.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the systems around you, keep looking for those loopholes, and we will catch you next time.